All right, breaking down Tyler's outfield throwing mechanics. So here he is in his shuffle step, or drive step, we'd say, better way. Back foot driving into front foot gets his momentum going. I think, Tyler, you could be pushing, getting more momentum going, staying low too. Try not to get to the point where you're in too much extension, like keep the legs flexed. Keep your momentum moving forward. You can see when you hit right here, your momentum's kind of slowing down. You can see that knee, your back knee here staying out or, back over the foot, not moving forward for a while. And then as you load and open into front foot strike, just rolling over. So we can see the back heel coming up, so just rolling over. You have a lot of horizontal abduction, meaning you can cock your arm and pull it really far back. The problem is we got to be careful. If we do that without a lot of hip to shoulder separation, it just puts the arm in a really vulnerable place. So we can see there's a little hip to shoulder separation here, but quickly they sync up, even to right before the arm even cocks, and then we get the arm in the hyperangulated or that dragging position way behind the back. That's going to put a lot of stress on the front of the shoulder and the elbow. So the key is keeping your momentum going when you plant and getting some drive through the back hip. The back leg drive would help drive the hip forward, and then you get more of the separation. So when we go into kinematic sequencing, I'm going to look at angular and rotational. We will see, on the left is the angular. You can see how the hip end, which is the red, and the green, which is the trunk, are peaking at the same time. So these are the speeds of the trunks, and they're peaking at the same time. We want those separated. We'd want the hip going first, then the trunk going. And we can see the glove, the blue, going off before, which is helping drive a lot of that rotation. So we really, the key is, I wouldn't say your glove is causing a lot of problems, because you have some momentum going into front foot. You're just allowing your back or your hips and trunk to rotate together. And that's why I say if we can be more focused on loading your back leg and pushing and driving through your hip, it'll break them apart and get your hip to go before. If we look at the linear aspects of it, we can see it even looks like the hip, the red on the right to the green, which is the trunk, looks like the hip's even peaking after the trunk, and that's linear, going forward, which is really important because that's where all the power, or that's where all the force, we want the force to go towards the target. So angularly they're kind of going together, but when they both peak force towards the target, the hips are even later or look more behind than the trunk. We don't see much energy coming through the hip, pretty poor, pretty low. So there's probably just, all it is your momentum hitting front foot. So we do need to really make sure we plant and drive and peak that back leg to really peak the hip speeds and peak them early. Also too, that will, like I said, that's going to hopefully help separate the hips and shoulders, and we don't get this dragging arm problem here. And you can see when you don't separate, things continue to fly open and over rotate. So if I look at chest orientation and the lateral, you're 24 degrees lateral, that's borderline. We don't want to go anything past 25. So you can see you're pulling off really hard to glove side, which is how you're using a lot of trunk rotation, and you're not getting a lot of forward trunk tilt, where you're not driving a lot of that energy forward. It's more driving and rotation. The arm, you have an incredibly mobile arm, and the point to where you got to be careful with it. All that joint laxity, I mean, it's amazing to see that arm laying back and in that hyperangulated position. So that's where I do get concerned. And I think because you're so hypermobile in your arm, you're having to like really force your trunk down and really force your front leg drive and trying to accelerate an arm that doesn't have a lot of stability in it. So I would be concerned if you started throwing harder with this arm action, it definitely would injure you. So you can see at this point here, when the arm gets up, you're trying to accelerate. We should have accelerated before that point. So before that point, we'd want to see power going into front foot and the trunk wanting to delay and stay back, and then we can see everything pull apart and separate. So It's going to be really just trying to stay low, get more momentum, and really drive and push through the back leg to get the trunk to pull away from the shoulder, and just get used to hips and shoulders moving apart from each other more and more and more, so it's not just your arm trying to create that separation or that delay, because that's going to make you more vulnerable to injury.